friends, welcome back to Midweek as we continue through our journey, Faith Deconstructed. Now, last week we talked about the importance of foundation and why it's so necessary to build on a strong foundation. And tonight we're going to carry that over by talking about the concept of truth. Now, truth, you may think you understand it, you may think you don't understand it. What is truth? But truth is typically used in one of two ways, either subjectively or objectively. And so we're going to kind of play on this to get a better understanding of what we're talking about when we refer to Christianity as a whole. And so let's kind of start out with, you're going to assume this might be a trick question, but it's not. I'm just going to make a statement and we're going to decide if that's true or not. So if I just say this, the cup is in my hand, is that a true statement? Now, you may say, well, of course it is. But my next question is this: what makes this a true statement? You see, there's a philosophical term for this called the theory of truth. And this is talking about objective truth. And the theory of truth basically says that an object or something is true based on its relationship to the object. So if it matches, if it reflects, if it corresponds to the reality that it's referring to, then that is what objective truth is. So the fact that I make the claim that this cup is in my hand is true because clearly it matches my reality. It reflects the reality. So the cup is in your hand because the cup is in your hand. That makes that a true statement. The other position in which we use truth is called subjective truth, right? And this is where something is based on feeling or opinion or something of that matter. So what I want to do is I want to give you a couple of phrases and you just try to figure out if this is a subjective truth or an objective truth. I wrote a few of these things down. The first one is this: that the Dallas Cowboys are the greatest NFL team. Is that subjective or objective truth? If you said subjective, you were right. If I say that Camp Point is in Adams County, Illinois, is that objective truth or subjective truth? That would be an objective truth, right? Pepsi is better than Coke. Which truth is that, subjective or objective? Are you getting the idea? But here's where things get interesting when I ask this question: Christianity is true. Well, it's not a question, that's a statement. So when I make that statement, Christianity is true, is that objective or is that subjective? And this is where the problem of deconstruction comes from, because a lot of people, even in the world of Christianity, those who haven't deconstructed their faith, will assume that that statement is a subjective truth, that Christianity is true because it's true for you individually. But that's not the case. Christianity is true because it's an objective truth, right? James Warner Wallace, he wrote several books, one of the greatest apologists of our day, in my opinion. He makes this statement. He says, I'm not a Christian because it works for me. I'm a Christian because it's true. So what does he mean by that statement? I'm not a Christian because it works for me. I'm a Christian because it's true. What he's doing is he's like basically deconstructing the subjective truth idea. He's saying that it's not just like Christianity's hard. I'm not a Christian because it works for me. And if you've been a Christian longer than a few months, even a few years, you're going to know that Christianity can sometimes be extremely challenging, right? There's things that you want to do that you don't do. Why? Because of your faith. There are things that you're called to be that you are, and those things could be challenging, right? To get up on a Sunday morning to go and worship, that could be challenging. And so sometimes being a Christian isn't the easiest thing. And it's not because it's true for me. I'm a Christian because it's the truth, objectively, not subjectively. And this is where it starts to carry over, because if you start to look at what Jesus says about himself, he makes some extremely bold claims that turn this from a subjective idea to an objective truth. When Jesus starts making the claims about himself, things become drastically different. Christianity isn't a feeling or an emotion. Christianity in and of itself is an objective truth. It's true because it's true, right? It's true. And so I'm going to give you some verses. We're not going to look at all of them, but I want to give you some verses where Jesus kind of quotes himself and what he feels and claims about himself, the deity that he's involved in. But before I give you all these extra verses, I just want to talk about one story, and it comes from John chapter 8 towards the end. Right now, Jesus is going and he's doing things. This is the the chapter where the woman's caught in adultery, Jesus starts challenging some of the religious leaders. And towards the later part of the chapter, Jesus actually becomes accused of being not just a Samaritan, but a Samaritan that has a demon. So what they're saying is, you're a demon-possessed person who can do the things that you do from the power of the devil, not because you're God's son, but because you're possessed by a demon. And that's the only reason you can do these miraculous things, but you have no part of us because you're a Samaritan. So they are attacking him. These are religious leaders of that day, and they are attacking Jesus because of some of the things he says. And I just want you to hear the objective truth that he throws in here as he responds to their claim. And this comes from chapter 8 of John, the gospel, starting with verse 48. Here's what Jesus says. We're going to read all the way to the end of the chapter, starting with verse 48. It says, "The Jews answered him, 'Are we not right in saying that you are a Samaritan and have a demon?' And Jesus answered, 'I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. Yet I do not seek my own glory. There is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death.' The Jews said to him, 'Now we know that you have a demon. Abraham died and as did the prophets. Yet you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death.'" You see how they're questioning Jesus? If you say people who keep your word never die, what happened to all these people of the Old Testament? Specifically, Abraham and all of those guys, right? So they're saying, certainly now we know that you're crazy. And he continues, "Are you greater than our father Abraham?" That's what they're asking him, who died. "And the prophets who died. Who do you make yourself out to be?" And this is where Jesus answers it. He says, "If I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he is our God. But you have not known him. I know him. If I were to say that I do not know him, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him, and I keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad." So the Jews said to him, "You are not yet 50 years old, and you've seen Abraham?" And Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you," here it is, this is where it gets interesting, "before Abraham was, I am." So they picked up stones to throw at him because Jesus hit himself, but Jesus hit himself and went out of the temple. So this is a huge moment. Now, to give you some clarity of what Jesus is saying, he's going all the way back to Exodus 3 and quoting the moment that Moses was talking to the burning bush. Remember, this is where Moses is being called out to go free the Israelites, and they're going to go into the wilderness. He's going to free them from Pharaoh. They're going to go out, and Israel is going to be born. And as Moses is sitting there talking to the burning bush in Exodus 3, he has this dialogue with God, and he says, well, if I go back to the people and I tell them that this is going to be the plan, who do I say sent me? And here's what Moses says, or here's what the burning bush says to Moses. He says, "Tell them that I am sent you." And so now all these years later, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees who are accusing him of being demon-possessed, and he is going back and he's quoting and he's naming himself the I am from Exodus 3. And so when he says, even before Abraham was, I am. So now Jesus is equating himself to the one of Exodus 3 who told Moses, my name is I am. You see, when Jesus is connecting the dot here, they want to stone him to death for blasphemy because now he is not just saying he's the Son of God, he's equating himself to God. That is an objective truth. That's not just a feeling that Jesus has. It's not true just because it's true to him. In fact, C.S. Lewis says, if you look at all the claims that Jesus puts on himself, you have to come to three different conclusions. One of three conclusions. Jesus is either a liar, he's a lunatic, or he is the Lord. And you have to decide for yourself what that answer is. Is Jesus a liar? Is he a lunatic? Or he's a Lord? Now, the Pharisees obviously think that he's a lunatic at first and a liar. So that's why they're willing to stone him. But let's look at some of the other passages. I'm just going to give them to you. And you can look these up for yourself to just kind of see what Jesus makes. And these are objective claims that Jesus makes about himself, right? We've got John 8:48 through 59, which is what we just read. The I am, right? That comes from Exodus 3:14. Then you've got Matthew 9:1 through 8. Jesus is forgiving sins. Only God can do that. And so Jesus, again, is equating himself to God. Jesus accepts worship. Now, here's all these passages I want to give you where Jesus is actually accepting worship, which is something only God can do. There's Matthew 2:11, Matthew 14:33, Matthew 21 verse 9, Matthew 28 verse 9. John 20, verse 18. These are just a few of the passages in which Jesus accepts worship. And so with all that being said, now I want to ask you, and I want to make that statement again, Christianity is true. Now, is that a subjective claim, or is it a true truth? Is it objective? Is it true based on the reality around us that Jesus is in fact Lord? And when you start building up that truth, right, there is nothing that can hold you back. And so when you come into this crossroads with the deconstruction, a lot of times what you're seeing is people are deconstructing from a false sense of religion, a false sense of Christianity. It's true to them subjectively, but they haven't come to the crossroads where they believe Christianity objectively. They don't claim it to be true truth. They claim it because it's true to them. And once they lose that subjective feeling and they start digging in and doing some things, like I said, when the wind comes and starts blowing the house around, it crumbles because they've based their Christianity on a subjective feeling and not an objective truth. Now, I hope that all of this makes sense. I know we were going into a philosophy lesson here, but this is really important to understand the difference, because Jesus making these claims about himself are the walls of truth that we put on our foundation so that when that wind comes, our house can stand firm. Friends, have a great week. We'll see you next time.